Hello, it's Antrice, and welcome to another episode of the Savvy Painter podcast. Before we get started, I just want to let you know that for the next 2 months, the podcast will be released every other Thursday instead of once a week. I have a couple of projects that are really important to me, and I need to take a little extra time for my studio this fall. But we'll be back on the weekly schedule very, very soon, I promise. Okay, my guest this week is Kathleen Speranza. I had a great time talking with Kathleen, and we lost track of time a bit, so this is a long one. So if it's late enough in the day, grab a couple of beers from the fridge or a glass of wine and get comfortable. Kathleen is a painter from Massachusetts. She earned her BFA from Boston University and her MFA from Yale. She teaches painting and drawing at Rhode Island School of Design. Her current obsession is portraits of flowers. And according to Kathleen, flower paintings are sometimes akin to stepping on the third rail. There are so many stereotypes that go along with the subjects that tackling it can be dangerous, particularly for a female painter. But Kathleen, I think, is fluent in the language of color. She understands their subtleties and arranges them masterfully on her canvas, allowing each its place so that the subject sings. This is a topic I am completely fascinated by, so I grill Kathleen on her palette organization, her interest in the Munsell Palette, and when she chooses to use it. We talk about life, and yes, having one does inform your art. As much as we'd like to lock ourselves in an ivory tower and paint 24/7, it just doesn't work. We circle back to this topic a few times as it relates to taking a break, so that we have the opportunity to distill the stimulus into a painting. We also talk about maintaining a painting practice after having a child and how that actually makes you a better painter. And we get into a little aside on artists who have more than one kid and how badass we think they are. This episode is just chock full of wonderful bits of wisdom. I don't want to list them all. I just want you to hear it from Kathleen herself. But one last jewel I want you to keep an ear out for, which is Kathleen's insights on asking for help and also how she became comfortable with frustration when she paints. So here is Kathleen Speranza. Hello, Kathleen, and thank you so much for being on the Savvy Painter podcast.
Thank you, Antrice. I'm really thrilled to be here. Thanks for asking.
Tell me about some of the artists that inspired you when you were younger, or artists that really sort of made you want to paint.
Yeah, big question. Growing up Catholic, long story, but growing up in the Catholic Church, you're sort of surrounded by imagery, religious imagery, sculpture, painting, stained glass. I think, a lot of the visual language that I picked up was sort of unconscious in that way, just being kind of surrounded by it. My husband is Protestant, and he's kind of horrified by all the religious, he thinks they're idols, I'm like, honey, they're not idols, it's art, But I remember really distinctly being, I think I must have been like in 4th grade or so, walking by a statue, and I was at eye level with the bottom of the statue, and it was the Virgin crushing the snake. I don't know if you know this. It's a very thing in Catholic imagery. And she was crushing the snake. She had this fantastically calm expression on her face. And the snake was writhing under her feet. And her toes were like crushing its windpipe. And I remember thinking, oh my God, that is so cool. Just having that viewpoint going by that sculpture. And then, just basically looking at the imagery around me, and I think it just kind of seeped into my subconscious, that images and feelings and I guess you could say a kind of meditative state is connected. They're all connected somehow.
That makes sense because so we were kind of chatting a little bit before I officially started. But yeah, we both have that Catholic background and just sitting there like weekly. And, as a kid, I was distracted by all the, I would just sit there and space out and, and look at all the images.
Absolutely. Much more interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. The sculpture too, when I think about the Stations of the Cross and looking at the sculpture, and of course some of it was just horrible. But the church I actually grew up in, there was really pretty good stuff. I don't know who did it, but watching the sort of tableau of the life of, the sort of Passion of Christ, and watching how the figures interacted with one another in those relief sculptures, I think that had an influence on me in some way. And Michelangelo was probably the first real crush. Yeah,
The artist crush.
yeah. I mean, just so great, and the kind of transformation of stone into flesh. It was. I just remember being, just awestruck, and still am for that
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm just thinking about how clearly that was used as a, as you sort of alluded to, as a method of storytelling. And for kids like me that were kind of spacing out, you still are getting you're still getting the story, even if you're not listening.
Exactly. Right. I think that's calculated on some level.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're paying attention. We're just not paying attention to the stuff they're talking about. We're paying attention to the interesting things.
Right.
But yeah, being a kid and spacing out, I think, probably every artist can relate to that. Just the things that you notice and that you're taking stock of are visual. So they're silent. And I think a lot of people who are verbal and not visual just think you're kind of a flake, but meanwhile, you're really paying attention pretty
Yeah.
deep.
Yeah, and really in tune, or at least, I feel like I always was like really in tune with, I don't know, things like facial expressions and how people are reacting, like body language. And, I don't know if that was a part of it, like seeing all these statues of, like getting really, like telling a story and being very emotive with art as a method of conveying emotion, and then kind of bringing that into your actual reactions with people, or your actual responses to people, of just being able to observe that.
Right. No, that's really true. And I think also it could have something to do with the kind of sacred context, that you're in this environment where the meditative quality of prayer, or, however you want to look at it, is also entwined really with imagery. And so whether or not you're practicing, I think having grown up Catholic is just kind of an indelible scar or an indelible kind of brand, on your soul. But it's actually, there's a lot of beauty in it, and a lot of real richness to the visual, kind of stuff we're steeped in. So I do appreciate it on that level.
Yeah. How do you think it impacted your choices going forward, like, to create? Did it inspire you to start painting, or did it?
Really? Not really. I mean, I was one of these kids who was always drawing. I was not very verbal as a young kid. My sister was a really brilliant kind of verbal person, and I ended up feeling like my world was much more quiet, much more silent. So drawing for me was a way to just kind of communicate an interior life. And so they kind of left me alone, They saw, oh, she's busy, let's leave her alone. And they still do, which is nice. So drawing was always present. And I don't remember really a time that I wasn't drawing. And I made little sculptures and played with clay. And so I was always doing something with my hands. My dad is a master bricklayer and a master craftsman with concrete and building. Mm-hmm. So there's kind of, our family, there's I would say a talent for touch and building and putting things together. So that was kind of an inherent thing that I think I probably picked up from him. But yeah, no, painting didn't happen until college, really. And my first painting teacher was a student of Leonard Anderson. And so Leonard, his influences, really felt, I think, throughout a lot of contemporary painters.
Yeah.
Having been touched by that brain, that sensibility. Langdon Quinn, he was the first painting teacher I ever had, and I hadn't even really thought of painting. I thought I was going to do sculpture, actually. And but as soon as I saw that magical thing happen on the canvas, that was it. I was pretty hooked. So,
wow.
Yeah, and he was a terrific teacher, very very understated, and he kind of let us explore the perception and just how ordinary perception is a really magical thing, a really extraordinary thing.
What were some of the so looking back at it now, because I know you've been teaching for 30 years
Oh my God, yes.
yourself.
Terrifying, but true.
It's amazing how
Oh,
fast time
yeah,
goes. It's kind of
yeah.
exponential. Um,
Uh,
but I'm kind of curious, like looking back now with the perspective that you have today, what were some of the, like, I mean, I guess the question is, can you sort of identify what the, the torch that was passed from Leonard Anderson to, through this teacher to you?
Langdon, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it basically has to do with color. The color is the blood of the painting. It's the kind of life force that the painting is built with. And we I think being aware of color as a language was really kind of the opening point for me. And I remember doing a painting that, probably the first painting I can remember really thinking was pretty good. And it translated the color and the light of the figure that I was looking at onto this two-dimensional surface. And when I look at Leonard Anderson's paintings and the kind of incredible intelligence of the organization of color, the emotional connection to how color and form become just this unit. And the emotional thing is big too. I think there's an objective thing where you're just perceiving something very specific, but in the creation of the painting, you look at someone like Leonard, and those paintings have a really powerful emotional just punch, and also the
Uh-huh.
connection to art history, just the erudite understanding of the history of painting, really. So for me, those three things: perception, kind of magical thing that happens when you create space, light,
Mm.
and then the connection to art history, which has always been very important to me. I would say those three things. They come from Leonard and wherever his teachers, and this beautiful passing down of a torch, if you would. Yeah. And I think that's what I try to do with my students, is just kind of pass on this terrific thing, this great language.
I want to ask you about, I mean, you mentioned the color, and I know a little bit about how you paint, and I am fascinated with it because it is exactly opposite of how I paint.
Oh my God.
You are so organized, and I am so like, if we could put a picture of my palette next to your palette, it would
Oh
just
well,
be
but you know
so
what?
funny.
It seems that way, but it's deceptive. That palette, I only really use that palette for really specific subject matter, and I learned that from a portrait painter in New York,
Uh-huh.
and he's just amazing with color. But it was just sort of an opening into understanding how to organize color in my mind, in terms of value, saturation, and and hue. So I feel like I'm always learning something about color,
Yeah.
and every palette's a little different, And I'm actually studying Munsell right now, which I never really learned in any kind of
I'm not familiar with
traditional way.
Munsell.
Yeah, Munsell, it's a way of organizing color according to hue, value, and saturation.
Hmm.
And it's just really, really good stuff. And I think for someone who works from life, looking for really specific, complex color,
Uh-huh.
it just makes a lot of sense. So here I am at the age of 54, and I'm always learning something new about color. So that particular
That's
palette looks
exciting, though.
really nerdy, And it is kind of nerdy. But
It is.
it's
I
just,
kind of feel like it's like the only way that I can feel like I can describe it is if you like I'm not that bad and I'm not a hoarder, but like those TV shows with the hoarders and they're you look at their houses and you're just like, how do you live in
hell
that?
do you live in that thing?
And then like so the opposite would be I don't know, like
Yeah.
there's the Zen master or whatever. Like I was just reading something. There's this guy who has got his possessions down to 50 items and that's it. And, and so I kind of feel like it's for palette organization. I kind of feel like I'm on the side of the hoarder.
It's funny. I've had students. I love watching my students set up their palettes. In fact, I've taken pictures, like if halfway through the semester of each person's palette, and then I show them. And I've had kids who just go cuckoo, and they have this amazing feeling for viscosity, and they have to have tons of paint out there. And then I have people incredibly tight, just really dry and really tight. And I've seen that work in both ways.
Yeah.
And I think it ends up being just a habit probably, and temperament. I'm a little bit on the neat side. I would like to have my color really clean, so I can see what the hue is before I put it down, because a lot of what happens is that I mix on the canvas. So I put down a color and then I kind of push it into the next color. So if the color is actually too if I don't understand the color I'm putting down, when I get it on there, it's already going to become complex, you see? So it's it's got to be clear at the outset.
Right.
So that makes a lot of sense just for me. But a lot of my chaos happens on the canvas. So, so it's got to be something's got to be logical,
That's really interesting. And you mentioned that you don't paint like that all the time. So how do you make your painting decisions in terms of your palette when you need to be really organized versus when you're willing to kind of let go?
Yeah, well, it's pretty much always based on the subject. I'm pretty cheap, so I don't like to waste paint. That big palette that I mix is like outrageously, time-consuming and expensive, and I put it in the freezer so it'll last like a week and a half or so. Just so it's kind of amazing how it does freeze. But I think at this point, what I do generally is kind of have a sense of a subject has a certain kind of color chord, kind of a color relationship already set up. And so I'll kind of use maybe three or four major colors, and then I'll put out a string of values. And those you saw that perhaps in that big palette. And values, neutral values. And those sort of help me think about the neutralization of chroma, which ends up happening a lot in some of the subjects I paint. So, but I was trained on a prismatic palette, the whole thing, warms and cools, separated with white, and that works great too. I think there's probably no real, sort of one deal with palettes. I think whatever works for you is fine, and I just feel like the things that I'm interested in now are more specific in terms of color, so I need a more specific painting palette in order to get that. So that's really the only reason for it.
Interesting. Yeah, because your paintings, I mean, they're so delicate and they've got so much going on there and you have such, I mean, I think we all get fascinated with things because we're trying to solve our own problems, maybe.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm just
I
like,
look at paintings to steal stuff. I don't know about other people, but I watch people in the museum and I'm thinking, what are they doing here? They're not even painters, They're not stealing it. But yeah, it's like you're always looking to kind of increase your vocabulary,
Yeah.
But then again, you kind of can't. I mean, it's sort of. I want to be Piero, I mean, in my dreams, I paint really orderly, quiet things that are mathematically perfect, and my process is utter chaos, and so you have this. At least I do have this sort of yearning to be somebody else. And it hasn't happened yet, so I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. So
no, it's not going to happen. It's
yeah. I better get with it.
Right. Or at least like, when I'm looking at other people's paintings, or for example, what I'm, kind of thinking about now when I look at your paintings is you have this like really beautiful transition, or this really beautiful, I guess, control between desaturated versus really saturated colors, and these delicate flower petals. And I really, like, I look at that and I'm like, huh, like, wow, like that's just it's so well done, and it's so
Crazy.
beautiful. Like
Oh, thank
every,
you.
like the control in just in the saturation versus neutral colors, but also, the brush strokes and all that. So you can look at somebody else's painting and kind of yank that apart, and then go back to your own. And maybe if you've noticed 100 different things, like one thing will translate, right?
Oh, but that's such a great way to think about it. Yeah. I mean, the yearning really to sort of gain more vocabulary, and I
Yeah.
think when you get older, though, it's kind of like, about 5 years ago, I was really dissatisfied with what I was doing, and I kind of ended up going to JSS, which I know you've done
Hmm.
in Italy, which was completely amazing. And I think at that point, I had turned 50, and it was kind of a watershed. I figured, well, you better accept who you are at this point because it's kind of too late to become somebody else. So I think there was this, it's a midlife thing, I think. But, and then I began to realize that the best parts of my work had to do with a sense of atmosphere and I guess you'd call it a transparent space.
Uh-huh.
And so these flowers, which frankly, I mean, it took me a while to commit to this subject matter. It's like lighthouses and sad clowns. It's like a woman painter. You put a gun to your head with flowers.
Right,
But
right.
but and there's so many bad ones. It's just horrible. But the subject really calls me, and I think it has something to do with permanence and impermanence, transparency and opacity. I don't know. They really they fascinate me, and I think maybe there's something about my particular sensibility meeting up with the qualities that the subject has.
Uh-huh.
So, kind of taking stock of that, and then realizing, okay, so that technical stuff that I seem to do over and over again is very important to me, and I need to pay attention to it, and I need to try not to turn myself into somebody else, but to kind of accept my own sensibility, however strange or frustrating it might be. And then, and then I sort of asked for help. I've been asking friends to really look at the work, and I've been very, very encouraged and really happy to get a lot of very good feedback that has been useful to me. So I think as a painter, just allowing the viewer, particularly painters I really respect, to tell me what I'm doing, that's been very important, I would say, over the last 4 or 5 years.
Oh, that's really
Yeah.
interesting. The asking for help from other painters. I think I don't know, like there's this thing that I think maybe it's the stereotype of the artist or something, that because you're supposed to be quote unquote talented or not,
Hmm.
that maybe asking for help is admitting that somehow that you're not talented. Like I don't particularly see myself as very talented. I just think I work really hard and I'm very
That's
curious and
no,
I'm,
that's like 99% of it right there. I mean,
yeah.
talent will get you like not too far, really. I mean, I think it's, and I've been teaching for so long. I've seen this over and over again, and it's really the grit thing.
Yeah. Did
That's
you
that
read
they
that
talk
book?
about that. I haven't. No, I should. I really
It's
should.
good.
Is it really good? Yeah,
Yeah, it's really good.
it is completely true. I mean, I think, it's a marathon. I tell my students, look, if you don't like being in a room alone for 8 hours a day with an object, don't even think about about being a painter,
Yeah.
because this is what it is, and if you can be excited and stimulated and uh, just full of curiosity with that limited, I guess, a limited life in some ways, then it may be for you. But but yeah, I think asking for help. I've always had a really hard time sort of seeing what I'm doing, and I'm kind of insanely self-critical to a fault. So, I think, and having a kid has been really helpful that way because my son's really smart and he has a great eye. And so I'll literally, I'll bring a painting home and I'll say, honey, what do you see? And he'll say, Mama, that blue. You got to get rid of that. That's just not working. And, he's very blunt, but then he'll say, yeah, I think this one, he'll be very kind of clear about what he sees. And so, but I think JSS was very, very helpful for me in that regard. Just sort of being there with other people who were as passionate about the same things, and allowing for, I don't know, kind of trying to go to the next level in my work because I hadn't been satisfied. And I think, what we do is actually, I wouldn't call it a performance, but, it really is communication. So you need to have the other side of the fence to be able to see what you're doing.
Yes. Yeah. I just have to say, because I feel like I've talked about JSS so much that, of course, everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about, and I've learned that they don't.
Oh, yes, yes. Yes.
So JSS is a summer program run by Israel Hirschberg in Italy. He brings an enormous number of artists. Yeah. It's growing and growing, but Civita, Italy, and I don't know how many people were there when you were there, Kathleen, but I feel like there was probably about 100 students combined between all of the programs when I was there.
Yep. I think it was close to that. Maybe not that many, but close to it.
It's just this intense. If you're in the master program, for example, you're studying with Israel Hirschberg and whoever his guest of honor that summer would be.
Yes.
But you're surrounded by like all these artists who are equally obsessed with painting. You feel
and normal,
drawing.
Like for the first time in your life, Well, I think part of it too is, I came home and I remember telling my husband, it was like, I feel like most of the time I swim around in brackish water, but I'm a saltwater fish, and being in Italy and being in that program is like swimming in salt water. It's all around you. Art is all around you. It's very normal. It's a natural thing to be a painter. It's not this bizarre, strange thing that we do. And I think, your tribe. You really need your tribe. And, the whole sort of, if you consider art as a big, giant, the art world in a sense, painters are really a very specific set of people within that. And I think knowing that there were as many people passionate about painting and the kind of painting that I'm interested in, it was just fantastic. And I think it gave me a feeling of community for the first time in many years. And so just keeping up with those people and making new friends related to that program has been really, really a blessing. It's been terrific. And what he's done there is pretty extraordinary. I'm dying to go back. I'm hoping next year.
Me too.
Yeah.
I wanted to go so bad this year. Oh God, it was killing me. Like when I realized I couldn't go, I almost wanted to cry. Israel, I can't go. I'm sorry.
I went 2 years in a row because when I came home, I just wanted to get back on the plane, Yeah. And I've been to Italy several times, and I feel very at home there. And so the combination of that and and I think it's hard not to be surrounded by people who care about what you care about. And to me, just being on social media and being able to see and talk to other painters, it's just been terrific.
And you sort of alluded to this, but I'm kind of curious, did being in that kind of environment, whether it's JSS or not, where you're surrounded by all these artists who are equally passionate or equally obsessed, did that sort of allow you to reach out more and ask for help when you needed it, like you mentioned?
Yeah, I think I knew I had it was like a safe space in a way. We're all struggling with the language, and it's I think having kind of a midlife crisis was kind of good for me in a way because it strips away the sort of ego thing that can hold you back when you realize, wow, well, you know what? I better start liking what I'm doing because there's not that much time left. And and these people are doing the same thing, and they're going to help me see what it is I'm doing. And so just it was great. It was very liberating, actually. I gave a talk on my work, which I hadn't been preparing to do. Israel just asked me to do it, which was a little terrifying, but
I can imagine.
oh God.
No pressure, Kathleen.
No, no, no. But yeah, having that short talk and just and then talking to a lot of the folks after about what they saw. What do you see when you look at the work? And um, I've learned to take that on board as much as I can. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm kind of wondering too. This is just occurring to me right now, so I don't know if this is just an observation that's happening.
sure.
We were kind of talking about admiring other painters and not feeling like you need to paint like somebody else and sort of accepting your own voice, I guess, and just
Yeah,
being
yeah.
okay with sort of like, hey, I have a voice and I
Here I
can speak.
am.
This is kind of awesome.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like, looking back at it now, I'm actually coming to the realization at this moment that maybe it had to do with being around 100 other painters or, like that many other painters who are all painting a very similar, you're all basically painting, this very small area. And so oftentimes you're painting the same motif or something, like you're standing right next to each other for 6 weeks at a time and seeing that everybody's doing something, you're looking at the same thing and everybody's doing something totally different and beautiful and unique. And when you see that many interpretations of the same subject, you kind of go like, okay, mine's just as valid.
Right. Right. That's it. And it's very hard, really, to be around other painters in some ways because you can really just love what they do and want to incorporate, that way of working, and the painters I love generally are, well, I love a lot of paintings, but I really wish that I could do, sort of very calm, kind of orderly, rather tight paintings.
What?
And I can't do it to save my life,
Are you?
oh, I think of like Piero, you think of Lopez Garcia, although they're not terribly tight, but they're very, very ordered in a kind of perceptual way. And
That is amazing because when I
yeah,
look at your paintings, I think there's so much control and beauty in that. And so I'm really, honestly,
uh,
genuinely
I'm fooling you in a
surprised to
good
hear
way.
you say.
I'm fooling you. If you had a camera on me, it would be like a horror film, really. I mean, it's so they come in and out of focus. They get scraped down and worked over. They're extremely. I started with abstract painters, so I'm very much kind of connected to gesture and touch and mark making and moving around the canvas and color chords, color relationships. But I'm in the subject. When I'm looking at the subject, I'm so in love, really, with what I'm seeing, that it always seems like a bit of a disappointment that I'm not getting what I'm seeing because it's
Wow.
I'm getting something else. I'm getting something else, which is good. But I think that's the crisis for me that I always have is sort of, well, I'm getting something else, but what is it? What am I getting? Because it's really
Right.
not exactly that beautiful thing that I'm staring at. And then there are some painters who really can just go all the way through the perceptual steps of creating something that's, I guess you would call very, very true perceptually, very calm. I think of it as calm and kind of ordered. And what I do really isn't. And I never know if I'm going to make anything halfway decent. So yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, I have to
And
laugh at
look
you right
where,
now.
boy, it's amazing that I mean, I'm kind of amazed that you think that. So
Well,
I'm
yeah,
feeling
but I'm
somewhat
also
good.
wondering, like, all these people that you admire that you think are so in control and so, like, I'm willing to
Sure,
bet they're
yeah.
not.
Oh yeah. Anybody who's honest, come on. I mean, if you're really an honest painter, I think you really are so aware of the strangeness of the process. It's so
Yeah.
completely fluid in a way that you can't even begin to really describe, let alone understand. It's subverbal.
Yeah.
It's not even something you can put into language. So I feel like that's being unsure, having a lot of doubt, having a lot of self doubt is part of my process, and I've kind of learned to accept that. And that I think that's been the big shift. That it's okay to have the self doubt that I have. It's actually kind
Yeah.
of part of my work.
Well, doesn't it sort of have to be in a way? Because if you don't doubt what you're doing, then I think the only way you can not doubt what you're about to do on the canvas is if you have a formula that you're following and you're not looking at what you're painting anymore.
Right, right. And that sounds so good. It's every time I go to paint, I think, oh, so maybe it'll be easier today. Maybe it'll be like orderly today.
Right.
And it just never is. Accepting your own process. And in fact, when I teach, it's always been a real kind of joy to me to watch students develop their vision. And so you can have someone who comes in as a freshman seeing what they are doing and then kind of watching their transformation through the 4 years. And by the time they're seniors, you can see that kind of seed, of where they came in, what they came in with, and how they've developed it. And it really is pretty specific, and it doesn't change that much. So that students who have a particular sensibility, that will stay. That will pretty much hang on all the way through whatever it is they end up doing. And so that tells me, that tells you volumes really about how you can't control your sensibility. Really, you have to just ride it. It's kind of a wave. You have to ride it, dance with it, whatever.
Yeah. And then it's kind of the voice thing or the authenticity that it's so funny because what I feel like I'm learning from doing all these interviews is that you have that sensibility or that piece of you. And it feels like for the first 20 years of painting, we fight it and we want to get rid of that because we want to paint like XYZ or there's something else. And then finally you figure out that thing that you've been fighting is the intuition that you've been looking for this entire time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think getting older is a real antidote to that stuff because I'm not kidding. It's sort of like, whoops, okay, time's clicking here. I've got, I don't have enough time to become somebody else, so I better, take advantage of what I've got. So, the kind of a little bit of sadness about that, really. I mean, I went to Spain when I turned 50 with a friend who took me there, a terrific painter named Ana Guerra, a very good friend of mine, and we were in the Prado for a week and a half, just freaking out at how great these paintings were in the Velázquez.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I came home and I thought, oh, you're not Velázquez. This is so sad,
Right.
You're not going to be Velázquez. I mean, just kind of, it's kind of crazy. But I don't know, I think the yearning to have your painting heroes stay with you and be a part of you, it's kind of universal. I don't think any of us kind of escape that. But getting older does help. It really does.
Yeah.
Because you have to, you're kind of forced, really, to come up against a time issue that, and I think for me, I feel like pretty much a constant state of inspiration. So for me, just kind of nailing down the subjects is, I have a little bit of panic about it.
Yeah, and we kind of touched on that a little bit before we kicked this off, but what we were talking about was, kind of plein air versus studio painting. And I think I made a comment, something along the lines that it's interesting that I now live in this most amazingly beautiful place. And all I want to do is stay inside in my studio and work on things that
I know, it's terrible.
You made a really interesting observation about that. So I was wondering if you could kind of like talk about that again so everybody can hear it.
Yeah, I think we were talking about the sort of gestation time that happens between having an experience and being able to fully kind of grasp what that experience has been. And I think plein air painters, I wish I could be a plein air painter. It looks like so much fun, and I do it, but I'm never satisfied. I mean, I don't think I've ever been satisfied with anything I've done 100% outside. So I think for certain painters, there's a kind of a downtime that has to happen between an experience and a distillation of the emotional impact that it's had on you. So a lot of the Italian landscape paintings I did were, I had drawings, I had photographs, I had the experience of having been there, and I did a few paintings that were okay. Wasn't really satisfied with them, but then it was like a year or so that I was working on those paintings when I got back. And slowly over that year, I began to understand, first of all, how to mix those greens, which I had never seen before, So technically, just the technical challenge of a new place, is huge. And a landscape, you're out there, it's so stimulating, it's so beautiful and overwhelming. And I have a hard time focusing on the little square in front of my face, when I'm out in the
Uh-huh.
landscape. And it just seems so paltry, compared to what I'm looking at. And so that it's a parallel language, really, I think, at this point, that the painting is a parallel language to the actual observation. So when you're working on the language of painting, that's what you're doing. And when you're observing something, you're having that experience. So it's pretty complicated stuff. But I think when you're in front of the painting, that's when everything happens. That's when the real experience starts to happen.
Yeah.
Because that's all you've got. That's all you've got is this little square of, wood or canvas in front of you, and you're trying to have an experience through that language. So I tell my students too that it's kind of like a fossil of your experience. When you make a painting, all of those decisions and choices that you make are, they become kind of crystallized into a physical form. So we're experiencing your experience by looking at what you've put.
Yeah.
But that
What
experience,
you've decided to, what you've sort of curated or what you've distilled, as you said, from all this information, all this stimulus that you're experiencing when you're looking at the subject, whether it's indoors or outdoors.
yeah. And painting is so complex. I mean, there's so much. It depends how you paint, but for me, color complexity is just really, really important. And there's
Yeah.
just no way to mix the complexity of the colors that you see in a quick way out there. I mean, you can get some ideas, you can get some observations, and I'll take a lot of notes about color. But it's really only when you're mixing and putting a color down in front of you that you start to have the experience. So yeah, it's a straight. And you hear writers and poets talk about that too. That there's this gestation time really between an experience and then having a work of art actually manifest itself. At this point, I really do think that's true. Although I have friends who work entirely from life
Uh-huh.
and do amazing things. So that's temperament. It's a temperament issue as well.
But when you say that you have friends that work entirely from life, do you mean like plein air painters or observational painters or?
Yeah, both really. And that I think that goes back to what it is you're trying to achieve. Um, in some of the work that I'm doing, I think the complexity is so sort of profound in the subjects that I'm looking at that there's absolutely no way I can do it in one layer. It
Hmm.
takes a lot of reworking and overlayering and mixing again. And but I have friends who, really do these amazing things that are much more about a kind of visceral response and a kind of gestural intensity, or even a sort of fragmentary experience of light, or something very poetic that way. Um, so yeah, I mean, I just haven't been too satisfied with anything I've done fully from life. But that's, I think that's a function too of getting older and knowing what you're after a little bit
Hmm.
more.
Hmm. Yeah, I think oftentimes we have a vision, and when what appears on our canvas isn't like the vision we have in our inside of us, we get really, really frustrated.
That's pretty much all the time. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know, and that gets back to perception, like being able to see your own painting, right? So it's like the subject is so amazing. I pretty much I've always failed. That the subject is just too incredible, and but it's the same hope every time. It's the same like
Yeah.
I'll get it this time. If I just look hard enough and. But and I think in some ways that wrestling, with what you can possess and what you can't possess. A lot of the painters that I love and really, on a deep level connect to, really talk about that, about what you can possess and what you can't possess, what you can understand, what you can't understand. Um,
Yeah.
and so, I think of somebody like Vermeer, who is really all about what you can't possess. The light diffuses and fragments the form. So he's painting something he sees, but it's also unattainable. So to me, that's kind of where a lot of the magic happens. And it's a
Yeah.
kind of a frustrating magic, really, where you're trying your best to, I guess, be a servant to the subject, but it never really can happen because you're only making a
Right.
painting. It's not the thing; it's a painting.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because,
Yeah,
there's part of it is just like you're saying, trying to possess something that you can't possess, or, like a way that I think I've understood it before is it's like trying to hold vapor in your hands,
yeah,
you know?
exactly, exactly. So there's a poignancy there, really, to. And I think a lot of the great painters touch on that, whether they, are conscious of it or not. That the painting is a distillation of an experience, but the experience is so much more complicated than what the painting can be in some ways. But I think it's the yearning, really, to get something, to catch something that you love, that you feel for. So it's a kind of, I don't know, a frustration is like kind of, I've learned to accept it. It
Uh-huh.
was really hard for a lot of years for me to do that, to really accept that frustration is actually part of why I paint, and it's part of the process, to relax with it.
Yeah, that's a hard lesson to learn though,
Oh
isn't
yeah,
it?
oh yeah. That's another old thing too.
I think
That's
so.
another. Hey, you're young. You're too young to know. But yeah,
Just wait, just wait.
just wait. It'll happen.
And that's the last
Um,
thing you want to hear. And you're like, you don't know what you're talking about.
yeah, forget it. I know. Yeah, I think accepting your own vision. And when I think back on the teachers who really were in my corner all the way back, they were trying to tell me, look, this is what you do. This is your vision. Don't fight it.
Hmm.
Don't try to become somebody else. This is okay. This is what you do.
And once you finally accept that, it's like,
Yeah, but I need other people to help me with it. I've learned that I'll be just so neurotic, about I don't know. I just get
yeah,
very squirrely, and but to get to work out and have people see it, I don't know. I just feel like I'm not completely crazy, and it's okay
yeah,
to to work the way I work. And in fact, it's people respond to it, and that's just a real joy, real blessing when someone
yeah. And you
responds
were
to something
talking,
you've made.
I'm sorry, what?
When someone responds to something you've made, because you're in there wrestling around just trying to get this thing to work, and when someone responds to it in a really positive way, it's just the best. It doesn't get any better really for a painter.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was just going to comment too on that just to reinforce a couple things that you've said about asking for help. And I think what you're kind of alluding to is the importance of community and having artists that you trust that you can get some feedback from. But also, you and I kind of both mentioned this before we started talking. Just it sounds like both of us are just so fortunate, blessed, and
Oh,
lucky, and
yes.
all of the above to have this grounding force in
Mhm.
our lives. Like my husband, who's not an artist,
Yes.
just kind of like yanks me back down to the ground when I need
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Oh man, I really I could not do anything without this situation. I mean, my husband Parker is a designer and a builder. He went to RISD, where I teach now, which is kind of cool. And he is very, very talented in his own right, with woodworking and building structures and design. Of course, I got married a little later, so it was already baked in the cake. So he knew what he was getting into. But he's a very stable person, thank God, and I think, as I said earlier, kind of not tethered to the ground all too tightly half the time. And I think he just helps, doing things that I find tedious and like taking away time from painting.
Yeah,
And it's just a basic kind of an emotional support, even if he doesn't fully understand what I'm doing that day, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's the fact that I can get to my studio and I have the time to do that because there's somebody who supports that. And my son too. Really, he's a great kid, and he gets it. He gets what I do. So it's just really critical.
yeah, it is. And my husband forced me to go to Lake Tahoe this weekend. It was awful.
Oh no, that's
It
terrible.
was terrible. Yeah, and to like sit by a lake and just relax and not
Oh,
do anything else. But
relaxing.
he
Really.
Yeah, but he kind of had to force me to do that. Like, before I was looking for any reason to get out of it. I'm like, no, I need to work. I need to do this. I want to paint. I want to la la la. And he's like,
Hmm.
get in the car.
Yeah, just get in the car. I know. I know. Having a kid really helps with that because you have so many things you have to do, and then you end up really loving them. You just it's so much fun, to do these things. But you wouldn't probably choose to go pick up your kid, 2 hours
Right.
away. But once you get there, you realize, wow, this is life is kind of important, and
Just
and
a
you
little
just
bit.
kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we are very focused, and we can't help it. I mean, you wake up in the morning and your eyes open, and boom, there you go. You're inspired. So I think it's a burden in some ways to be a painter. You're always, what's the word? I don't know, just always inspired to make work. Yeah, I tell my students sometimes too that probably won't find anybody who loves painting more than I do, but the kid is another planet of love. It's just another universe, really. And I think having that, knowing that that's in fact the case, it gives perspective to what you're doing, and it makes it less. I become less neurotic, really.
Yeah.
Having less. I don't know, just obsessed. Even though I'm still obsessed, it's tempered really by responsibility, and I just adore him. And so I can't get him to pose for me though. I'm going to say that right now in this interview. So if he hears it, he's going to have guilt.
Give him that good Catholic guilt.
Guilt. I know we didn't really raise him in the church, so that's not going to work. But
that was the one good. No, okay. I have to be careful about what I say.
No, really. You're among friends. It's okay.
My mom listens to this. I'll be in trouble.
There we go. Yeah.
But I think that's really interesting what you're saying, just because it actually goes back to that distillation that you were talking about. Like, when I don't know, we touched on this a little bit, that feeling, I guess, of feeling, really ambitious and you got to go, 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 go. But you need those downtimes in order to distill things and to digest all that information like you're talking about. We can't turn it off. Like, that's the one curse of being an artist, is you're constantly like bombarded by all this beauty, and I'm seeing paintings everywhere, and it's very difficult to turn it off. So like that life that you're talking about, like when my husband like just says get in the car and you have to go pick up your son, or whatever.
It's good.
It's
good
vital.
For us. Oh, it's good for us. Yeah. And teaching for me has been a real blessing too, because I learned how to talk, which was nice. You have to really articulate what you're trying to get across to different people who have different ways of understanding. So for me, it's been a great thing, not only to get me out of the studio and into the world, but I just get so much back from my students, and it's just great for the most part. It's great.
Yeah.
But all the responsibilities we have, sometimes I think they just feel like burdens in a way, but when you're thinking about your work. But I think in the long run, you can't really paint unless you have a life. It's like you're painting about your life, right?
Right.
So if you don't have a life,
it forces you to be sane.
It does. Oh, there's no question. I mean, I tell my husband, if I weren't married, to him, I would be in a room by myself. I'd still be painting, but I wouldn't have a life. I wouldn't have a house, a kid, a dog. I wouldn't be able to do that. So
and you'd probably be a worse painter for it, I think, because you need to breathe.
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah, but you were saying before about the bombardment of stuff. It's like your head and your heart are so full of imagery that I think one of the reasons we get so panicked about it is that we need to be able to see it. Physically see it in front of us, and getting into the studio, you're able to actually put down, hopefully, all the stuff that's inspiring you, and finally kind of relax, like, oh, there it is, it's not just free floating stuff that's gathering in my heart, you can actually get that stuff out, and then you just feel a lot more sane. Having a life and having friends and a dog, and it's good. It's good stuff, I guess.
I know, and it's so funny to say that. It's really good to have a life, and it's really good to have friends, and but it's like, I think left to my own devices. Speaking for myself, and I think it sounds like you're the same way. That if I didn't have all that stuff, I probably wouldn't leave the house. I wouldn't leave my room. Like, I wouldn't even. It's not just leave the house.
Yeah, I know it. I was telling my sister, who is a tremendous, she has a wonderful career in water resource management. She goes all over the world. Really, really important job. Sustainability in different countries around water. Oh, and wow. One day I was in the studio, we were talking on the phone, and she said, "Oh yeah, I just met with the water minister of Uganda, we're working on this big project, blah, blah, blah." And she said, "Well, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm painting an eyeball." For the last 3 days, Right. It's like, oh my God, we couldn't be more different. So that ability to focus in on something it's kind of like a hunger. You have a hunger for it. Uh-huh. But it's not necessarily healthy all the time.
It's like, because you mentioned hunger, so it's making me think of it. It's like we have this insatiable hunger, but if you just sat there and gorged 24/7.
Exactly. I think you would have a harder time getting a distance on your work too. Oh, yeah. Being able to see it as a whole. I think sometimes when you work too long, you get tired and you make mistakes. Uh-huh. And you think they're great, and then the next day it's like, good God, why didn't I stop?
Why didn't somebody pull me out of here?
Pull me out of this. But, then again, it does require a lot of hours, Yeah. I mean, I think just that 10,000 hours thing that Malcolm Gladwell talks about, it's completely true. And it, just showing up, being there.
The consistency.
Consistency is critical. Mm-hmm. Even if it's only like, friends of mine have had new babies, and they're horrified that they're never going to get work done again.
That's the fear, yeah.
Oh, it's huge. It's terrifying. And it took me, I waited till I was 36 to have my son. And I thought, oh God, that's it. I'm never going to paint again. What I found out was that if I had 2.5 to 3 hours really consistently, like every day, every other day, I could put together work. And I ended up putting together my first kind of solo show.
Did you find that you were more productive that way when you had that restraint?
Well, you're so panicked, It's like, oh Jesus, this is the only time I have. I better get going. But I think it's more knowing that the consistency will save you. That if you can just get there a couple of hours, you don't need 8 hours. 8 hours is great, but if you have 2 hours, 3 hours, and you can just string it together consistently enough, you can do the work, and you will feel okay. You'll feel sane. So I kind of proved it. I proved that to myself, and I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing to know that. Yeah. But the consistency is key. It's kind of like working out. It's an athletic.
It is.
You get out of shape, and then you feel like you get behind.
Yeah, and you can't go. Like, just relax for 364 days and then go to the gym for like 3 weeks straight or something like that and think you're gonna.
That would be a bad scene. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a pretty picture. Yeah. But you love it. You love the work. I was watching the Olympics last night, which I love to watch. So
I love the Olympics. Yeah.
And, you see these kids in this pool, and like how many hours they must have been looking at the bottom of a pool,
looking at that line.
Oh my God. And we see this product, this beautiful prowess, and this incredible magic that they do, but we don't see the bazillion hours of drudgery, but you do know that they enjoy the drudgery. There's like a joy in that, the dailiness of it, and I do think that painting is similar. That you
very
sometimes you go in there and you really don't make much, or you make mistakes or whatever, but you're going to get up and do it again tomorrow. Or the next day. And so having that as it's a practice, really. Yeah. I think like yoga or like working out, I hate to bring it down to that level, but it really is a practice. And I think that's probably the key to any kind of real achieving what you want to achieve, really, is just sticking with it, just staying with it. And that's the way to do it.
Yeah, and having those things, that pull you out and give you that bigger perspective of what you're doing, because, on those days when it doesn't feel like you're doing anything and you're struggling and you're like trying to figure something out and you feel like all you're doing is making a big mess. those are the day, like sometimes, especially I think early on, like when you're just out of college or when you're just like in your first couple years of painting, it's really easy during those moments to only see that moment and feel like it's time to like, you know what, this isn't for me. I suck. I'm terrible. Like, I'm going to sell my paintbrushes and I'm done.
Well, I feel like that almost every day for a few minutes. That's sort of like, oh God, I can't paint. What the hell am I doing? I think it's a part of your conscious mind is trying to control the show. And what we actually do is on a very unconscious level in a lot of ways, and it's deeper than what your conscious mind can actually control. So I think you struggle with that idea that you're going to control something for a while, before you realize, well, these bad days are actually really important. And I think they are the difference between a professional and an amateur. I think it's sort of the number of bad days that you can endure, that you can get through, that you can be okay with. You're never okay with it. It's terrible. You don't go in saying, geez, I'm going to have a bad day today. This will be great.
Yeah.
You always have hope that it's going to be terrific. But that's just not the way it works. You got to go through all of those phases and just stay with it. Once again, getting older and looking back and realizing, I've done a lot of really bad paintings, and that's okay.
Because I learned something from them, and that I would not have learned if I hadn't done that bad painting.
Unfortunately, yes. That's the worst thing about being a painter, and absolutely nobody wants to hear that one, that you have to do a huge percentage of things that just don't work. If you're really painting, if you're doing, I guess, like a cookie cutter thing where you make the same painting all the time, which I can't even imagine wanting to do, there's no risk in that, So you basically are going to come up with something decent, or so you think. But if you're really painting, the risk is omnipresent.
Mm-hmm.
You can do crazy things all the time, and sometimes it works, sometimes it won't. But once again, you get up, go to the studio. That's it. Every day, as much as you possibly can. And not everybody can do it every day, and that's, I don't think that's a bad thing either. It's really the consistency, because life.
Yeah, and you have phases too. I mean, right when you had your son, I'm sure there was a transition period. And now, how old is your son now?
He's 17.
So
6'2". Keep feeding him. It's unbelievable what happens. They just
amazing.
Amazing. Yeah, the transition, I don't think that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Having a kid is such a huge deal.
You brought somebody into this world, and my God, you have to take care of him now and feed him.
It's just totally terrifying. And I remember the first couple of months thinking, well, who's allowing me to do this? Didn't they know who I was? This is crazy. And the anxiety, around keeping them alive, But the thing that's, I think, pretty amazing for women, and women have a really, I hate to be sexist, but we do have a bit of a harder time in some ways. Getting work done, carving out the time, saying, no, I'm not going to go to that PTA meeting. I'm not going to bake cookies for your class tomorrow, honey. I have to go work. It's, there's a real tug of war there that goes on. But I do have friends who have children and, who are younger painters, and they're kind of scared they're not going to make work. And I just tell them it's okay. If you have consistent time, you can do this. And I would absolutely encourage people to have a kid. You can't really talk about it. It's so big. You can't the words aren't really adequate.
Yeah. That's a different language.
It's not adequate. And I think it makes you more vulnerable. You feel much more vulnerable as a human being, being a parent. And for me, in some ways, I think my work has become a little deeper on the level of vulnerability.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. If you feel like having your son changed how you paint, or I mean, obviously not technique wise. I'm not asking about technique, but like that vulnerability in your paintings.
Yeah, well, technique is critical too, because I think your technique changes as your openness to subject matter changes. Becoming vulnerable, in a lot of ways, I think that's kind of what I'm painting about. The ones that work, the ones that have soul, really seem to me to be about a vulnerability, a kind of fragility, and then a kind of strength underneath that. So a lot of these subjects I'm looking at are ephemeral, they're very fragile, but at the same time, they have a kind of a, I'm trying to make them permanent, I'm trying to wrestle with the fragility or the vulnerability. And certainly having a kid put you in that zone.
Mm.
So it makes you a bigger person. And now that he's older, I can actually use his opinion, which is fantastic. In-house critic, it's great. I don't have to pay him. It's good. I would say absolutely as a woman painter, and I have several friends who are older women painters who have multiple kids, and I just look at them and I think, you are a goddess, and you're just unbelievable. As one is plenty for me, one is like, okay, that's about all I can handle.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But there are some people who have multiple kids, it's just, you are just awesome.
Yeah, Cameron Schmitz, I interviewed her, and I don't know if she knew she was pregnant when I interviewed her, but shortly after, she found out that not only was she had a toddler, and we talked a lot about having a toddler and maintaining your painting practice, and then she had twin boys.
Oh my God. Jesus.
She's amazing. She's just an amazing person. But like there's nothing I love more than like I open my Facebook and there's Cameron with two babies strapped to her in her studio, and she's painting away.
Good for her. Oh my God. I know, it's heroic, really. It is. Heroic. And there's a painter, a Dutch painter from the 17th century, Rachel Ruysch. I don't know if you know her work. I look a lot at Dutch painting lately because for technical things and also just the sheer beauty of some of those flower pieces. And Rachel Ruysch had 11 children. I mean, I'm like, what? How does that happen? It's probably certainly one of the greatest women painters of that genre.
And 11 children, wow.
So some women are just so tough, I really have a lot of nothing but awe, really, and respect for people who have multiple kids and manage to work and manage to get better at what they do.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of a strength in a way, because we have a layer of depth and a layer of sacrifice, that I think opens you up to the world more. You're more open, you're more, as I said, vulnerable, you're more aware of fragility, I think, because kids are they make you so anxious.
And determined too, I think.
Oh yeah. My sister's mother-in-law said, "Don't worry, they're hard to kill." That was great. So I say that to myself: they're hard to kill. Now he's 17, so I think we're safe.
I think you made it.
I think we've passed the mark there.
So I know I've had you on the phone for a long time. Are you okay on time?
This is fun.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
Can you talk to me about your process? So we've talked a lot about like the stuff like behind it, but how do you start a painting? How do you choose what you're going to paint?
Yeah, good question. So pretty much my process is always kind of like an immersion in a subject matter. So I almost always have about 7 or 8 paintings going at any given time. So it's kind of like a little ecosystem in the studio where, some things are starting to come to life, some things are in the middle, and some things are absolutely dead. I end up with a lot of dead soldiers, in my which I often will sand down and then try to work over. But I think of it as a sort of, it's like like an ecosystem, really. And what I do generally is I'll have an experience with the subject matter. Like, for instance, when I was in Civita Castellana, I don't know if you noticed this when you were there, but the elevation of the gorge, when you're on the edge of that valley, something about the atmospheric quality of that space, the clouds are right in front of your face. They're like unbelievably powerful, beautiful. So I became obsessed with the sky over there. So I ended up I have an iPad, so I took tons of shots on the iPad. I stood out there for hours, looking at cloud patterns and did a lot of little sketches. And I worked on clouds for about a year when I came back. And that's another subject that's very transparent and evanescent, and they disappear really quickly. And trying to pin them down, trying to pin them into space, into a place. So I'll start with usually some kind of an inspiration and then one painting leads to the next, and that's when you know you've got something.
Mm-hmm.
When you've really onto a subject, they just kind of keep coming.
Yeah, and you almost can't wait to start the next one. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So right now, I think I have like seven paintings going. One of them is totally confusing. I have no idea what I'm doing. A couple of them are looking pretty decent. A couple of them are dead. So they start to talk to each other, and then you kind of get on a roll with it. And I feel like I have very little control in some ways around what moves me.
Mm-hmm.
As I said before, this flower subject matter is like the third rail for a woman painter. I mean, just it's dangerous, and the potential for sentimentality and all of the stuff that people are terrified of.
Yeah,
it's right there, right on the surface. But I cannot stop painting them. Every one is a completely different experience, and what I'm finding is that I think they're becoming kind of I don't know, like a language. I'm able to say things through them that I haven't been able to say through any other subject.
Are you able to articulate what it is you're saying?
Yeah, I think they all have different properties. Okay, so there's one in the studio right now I worked on last night, zinnias. I don't know if you know zinnias, but they're like the trailer trash beauty queens of the flower world. They're like these weedy kind of tough looking crayon color things, and they have a really powerful kind of boldness to them and a survivor quality. And so the painting I'm working on, I'm trying to understand that. I'm trying to translate this sort of tacky, beautiful thing. It's sort of fun in a way, that the personality of that subject. And of course then there's all the painting stuff about form and color and light and composition and trying to get some tension, and those things come into play all the time. But then, some of the roses are like completely opposite from that. They're really delicate and really elegant and fragile, with just the most nuanced color, which you feel like you've never gotten in a painting.
Mm-hmm.
So those bring up another kind of feeling, fragility, and a kind of open atmospheric quality.
It's the way that you describe it. It sounds like you're painting portraits of.
Oh yeah, that's I think I've always been a portrait painter, to tell you the truth. When I think back on even before college, getting a portfolio together for high school, they were all portraits. Everybody, family, my friends, and I think just the act of observing, kind of honoring the subject is really where I do best. It's where I'm most comfortable. Mm-hmm. And I think these flowers, they're like very, very individual. I mean, there's nothing worse than a generalized flower painting. That's like the worst thing you can do. Like, this is a flower, this is what it's supposed to look like. Every one is utterly different. And the ones that grow, that I'm painting right now are, they're all different varieties, and they have different forms. You have to understand the forms. You have to understand the cup shape. Are they a dome shape? Are they what kind of wedge shape is going on there? So it's like you're using them to create a painting, but at the same time, you're really trying to understand them. Right. Forms. So there's a kind of a language going on, and the more I get into this, I begin to realize flowers are kind of a universal language. It's weird, as every culture, every every nationality, everybody has a connection to them in one way or another. And as a serious subject matter, it's pretty rare to find really serious paintings of this subject. And so I feel like I'm on very dangerous turf in some ways, which is actually kind of exciting,
Yeah.
And it's a kind of sexist, really, to think, well, you can't paint that because it's a feminine subject or whatever.
Right.
So I'm trying to sort of wrestle a little bit with that. So anyway, so I have all these paintings going on in the studio right now, and hopefully I've got like 2/3 of a show, I think. And I think I've got about another third to complete. So
do you have a show lined up already, or do you paint?
No. I don't on purpose, because I've done that thing where you're under pressure to produce work for a show, and it's totally deadly for me.
Yeah.
This time I'm really kind of doing it in a smart way. I think I'm getting a bunch of bunch of work together over, it's been like a year and a half now. And I'm going to find the right place for them. I haven't done that yet. Still looking for the right venue to show them. But they'll all be done. They'll be framed. They'll be finished. And I won't have that terrible pressure, which
the performance anxiety.
Yeah, it's just deadly. It's just I can't relax enough to make mistakes and play. If you think, oh my God, this has to be a good painting, that's a kiss right there.
Or worse, I need to fill the space. So like, okay,
Jesus,
that's good enough.
Oh my God, yeah. And I, as I said before, my percentage is 50% on a good day. I survive. And then 50% just go by the wayside.
And that's what you were talking about with those dead soldiers, where you you sand them down and
sand them down. I'm learning though to kind of put them to the wall, like turn them away from me, and look at them again, in a week, because I do get very kind of crazy, kind of critical, and I won't see what I'm doing. So I'll put them away, not look at them, then turn them around a week later, and see what I can see. So yeah, the dead soldier thing, and so I mean, there are some people who just save everything they do, and they do terrific work. I wish I was one of them, but for me, yeah, the percentage thing is just kind of sad but true. And I think
that's normal.
Oh God, I hope so.
I really think it is.
Oh, good.
I've 50%, that number has come up often. 35% also comes up, but yeah.
Oh, how good to know. When you do a bad painting, you learn what you really want. You know what I mean? Like, you don't necessarily know what you want until you see it wrong. And then seeing it wrong, you say, well, I certainly don't want that, so I must want this. So part of it, I think, is
knowing what you don't want.
Knowing what you don't want is important for me. I don't know. Maybe other painters don't have that, but I think it's part of the practice of getting somewhere. So anyway, that's what I'm working on right now, and I'm trying to stay focused because, of course, the summer, the landscape is amazing, and there's so many subjects that I love that I would love to work on, and I'm trying to be as disciplined as I can to stick with the subject matter to get deeper into what they can be all about, and I think that's working. I think I'm getting somewhere deeper than I've been in some of the other work.
What have you learned from that?
Wow, that's a good question. I think when you stick with a subject matter long enough, you start to transcend it. Hopefully, that's the hope. And in some ways, what I'm learning is that these things are kind of a muse for me. They're kind of like a cast of characters, if you would. I mean, so instead of seeing them as this is a flower painting, I'm thinking of them as they're definitely characters in some sort of a drama that's going on. And I never thought of myself as a narrative painter at all, but I think there's definitely some kind of narrative going on in them that sometimes they'll compress together and they'll create a kind of security for each other, and sometimes they'll fall apart or they'll move away from one another. So it's almost like you get one flower is one portrait, and then you get two or three, and you've got a group portrait on your hands. You have to start to field all of those relationships, and I see them. I think I see them in a very figurative way now, which I might not have seen had I not stuck with the subject.
I can see that.
So it's pretty interesting, and I think for me also the emotional thing is getting a little deeper. Just the subject matter kind of coming together with my particular sensibility, which has to do with atmosphere and translucency and light and things that you can't possess. So it's sort of like the subject is meeting up with things that are very deep for me.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if to me it feels like that's kind of your subject, and flowers are the vehicle that get you there.
Oh, I love you for saying that. That's great. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole swath of people who will just dismiss you out of hand, because
you paint flowers.
Subject, yeah. But But yeah, obviously, anyone who looks at paintings as paintings will know that there's something else. But I really appreciate it when people say that, because it lets me know that I'm on to the right track.
Yeah.
And you know what I've been amazed by is that a lot of my friends who are men painters really really respond to these flowers, which I think is so cool.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's about. I've thought about it.
Their response to it, or that you're surprised that men would
Yeah, I
respond to it?
guess I'm surprised that men like them so much. And it's really funny. I mean, I've sold quite a few of these to men, to painters who are men or just viewers. And I think, I don't know, maybe there's this thing where men are not allowed to be vulnerable. They're not allowed to have that place.
Yeah,
in their daily life.
stereotypically, yeah.
When they see it in a painting, they're relieved. I don't know, that they can respond to it. I don't know. It's just a thought, but it makes me happy to know that they're speaking to both genders in a way, because it's been such a sexist subject matter. Been kind of relegated to this sort of non-serious sexist woman painter crap. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So to know that that's really kind of not happening with these is good.
Yeah, you've been able to move past that and push them so that they're no longer about the flowers.
Yeah, they are and they aren't.
Yeah.
It's like the flowers. It's like if I were painting bottles, I wouldn't be able to get this, because the feeling for the subject matter is why I paint it. But then the coming together of your sensibility and the things that are important to you. So the subject is a vehicle for that.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to commit to that. Really, I was kind of horrified that this
that you were going to be painting flowers.
Oh yeah, I'm like, you got to be kidding me! Come on, you really, and so it took me really months to say, okay, that's it. I am doomed. I just have this lust, to create these things and to observe them and grow them, and so that's it. I'm allowing for it now.
Good. I like it.
Thanks.
That's what I'm here for, Kathleen. I'm just giving people, I'm handing out permission slips left and right.
Man.
I'm just like, here it is. You have written permission.
That's a good thing.
It's like getting a note from your doctor or something.
Yeah, a prescription. Take 2 flowers and call me in the morning. Yeah.
That's right. You're allowed to paint You're allowed to paint whatever you want.
Yeah. Damn it.
Oh, that's great. So I want to ask you, there's like 3 questions that I love to ask. Okay. So I'll start with this one. If you could own a painting by any living artist, what would it be or whose?
Oh, that's cruel. What a cruel question.
I know.
Antonio Lopez Garcia, probably. They're the most profound things being made today, in my opinion. And there are a lot of other people. Israel Hirschberg is a close second. Some of those landscapes are just sublime. I think what he's doing with space is totally unique, and the meditative quality of that space is something I haven't seen before. It's really helped me see the landscape in a lot of ways better, I think. So he's up there too. Of course, a lot of dead guys,
Yeah.
That's pretty much. But I think Lopez Garcia, I saw a show at the MFA a few years ago that was just mind-bending. And I think the level of reality to those paintings, not the realism, but the fact that they're alive, they're real. I can't put it into any other word really that would justify it, but they have as much presence as a person standing there.
Yeah.
And more than some people. So that would probably be my top.
And do you have a habit or a daily ritual that you feel like contributes to your success as an artist? And by success, more like growth.
just getting work done. Well, I exercise quite a bit, which takes a lot of time away from painting. And I always think, God, if I didn't work out, I'd probably get a lot more done. But I don't think I'd be able to be stable enough emotionally and mentally without having kind of a daily practice of exercise. I think it is the oxygenation to your brain and just kind of neurotransmitters and basically staying calm. And for me, being calm is really, can be very difficult. So it calms me down. And then when I get to the studio, I sweep the floor. Always. It's like the first thing I do is I sweep the floor, make tea, But I think that, as I said before, probably the biggest thing is just getting to the studio. Just, clearing the decks so that you can get there. And that means saying no to a lot of things. And that's the hard part is saying, no, I can't go to the movie tonight, or no, I can't go to that festival or whatever. I have to be in this room in front of this object for the next 8 hours. It can sound crazy, to a lot of people, but I think knowing and having the discipline that you don't question that, you just do it.
Right.
It's not like you decide to do it. It's what you do. So I think those two things have been really important.
Do you feel guilty when you say no?
I used to. I'm getting much tougher. I'm getting much more, well, I won't say bitch, but yeah, I'm getting in that mode as I get older.
I'm almost there.
Oh yeah. You have to.
I know.
It's the woman disease, really, to say yes to everything. And I hate to say it sounds awful, but there's a lot of things I can't do. I can't sew to save my life. I don't cook, I clean the house a little bit, but there's like a lot of things that, thank God my husband cooks, but there's a lot of things I just don't do because I have to be painting. And you miss out, you do miss stuff. But I think you don't really have a choice if you're an artist. You can try to ignore wanting to work, but you'll be miserable. And, it just doesn't work,
Yeah.
So yeah, just
saying no is actually kinder. Like I'm finding like what's happening is when I want to say no and I don't, I resent being there. I'm pissed off.
Totally. I read something about a study some people were doing on successful creative people. I think one of them was Philip Glass.
Yeah.
And this guy just kept talking about how difficult it was to get an interview. Because they kept saying to him, look, if I gave interviews, I wouldn't be able to get my work done.
Yeah. No, I think that you might be talking about, there's a great article. It's, I think it was Creative Inc. or something like that, but it was, Creative People Say No, I think was the title of the article. I'll find it.
That's it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, you just have to say no to a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And the women that I know who have the hardest time getting to their studios are the nicest, kindest, most loving people, and they stretch themselves out and do lots of things for other people, and I think they do end up feeling just sad, and somewhat resentful. And so I do tell my friends and my students, particularly as a woman, you're going to have a lot of responsibilities, and you do need to say no. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm busy, and that's tough, but it's critical.
It is, because by not saying no, you're kind of allowing other people's agendas to guide your life, and you're letting other people set your schedule in some ways, if you're like, depending on the scale of your ability or inability to say no. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's priorities. I think everything comes down to priorities, because you have such a limited time. What are your priorities? And I don't think we can choose to be artists. I think you're just kind of born to it, unfortunately. And it's a priority in your life, and you can build your life around that priority, which I pretty much have done, but also with the help of a husband and a son who are really supportive, thank God. But yeah, it's kind of the middle of the thing that you build your life out from. You build your life around it. And that's, I don't know, hopefully, maybe some other people have a different way of doing it. But that's really the only thing that's worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah. God, it's so critical.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, there's the cliche that, life happens quickly or whatever. Like we don't have a lot of time, but I think also added to that art is time intensive. Like you need a lot of dedicated time where you're focused and you can turn everything off and have that solitude in your studio. And that's what it requires. And it's easy to chip away at that.
Oh my God, yeah, it is. It's really easy to chip away at it. And once again, it's that habit thing. Habits are really important to say, I'm not going to decide that I'm going to the studio today. It's just what I do, right?
Yeah.
If I had to decide to do it, then I would think of all the other things I have to do, which would crowd out raw discipline.
Yeah, and setting systems in place. And like what you were saying about exercise is that most people, I don't know how you are, but I hate going to the gym is awful. Being at the gym, I love lifting weights. I'm one of those crazy, weird people. I love lifting weights. I love being at the gym.
We gotta some time. Yeah.
Getting dressed and getting in the car is the most difficult thing in the world.
It's the worst. It never gets any better either.
Yeah.
I know. That's why you can't ask the question, am I going? You
know,
that doesn't even compute, it's just
yeah, and so you have to just kind of like remove all the obstacles to going, like make it as easy as possible to say yes. Like if my clothes aren't ready by the door or where, like if they're not all together and all I have to do is if I have to go look for something, it's over.
It's so true. Yeah, it's raw habit. I'm a big believer in habit.
Yeah.
And just this sort of because so much of what we do is based on habit and good and bad, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, no questioning, no deciding, no arguing.
Which makes it so much easier. It's such a relief.
It's a relief. It's habit. It's what you do.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, seeing these athletes last night, and it's just another reminder. Talk about dedication to a singular activity. But that's like the highest example of discipline and determination to do this one thing really, really well. And they're all young, thank God. So they'll have the rest of their life to do other things.
Right.
But yeah, I think just discipline's really, really, really critical. Being in a studio, whether you actually get a lot of good work done or not, I think sometimes just being there, just looking at the stuff, it counts. It all adds up. It all counts. So and my studio is way nicer than my house because I live with two men, and a dog, big dog, and it's just kind of chaos. And I've kind of given up. They've broken my spirit, frankly. Given up on making a really beautiful, nice house, but I go to the studio and all my stuff is there,
It's your space. It's like the Virginia Woolf, like a room of one's own thing, where that's question. Your space.
That book made a big impact on me. Absolutely. And the kind of space you have too. I mean, I have friends who say, God, why do you have such an expensive studio? And, maybe it is a little expensive, but if I have to go here every single day, I have to be happy in that space. Yeah. And I want to go to that space because it's so pleasant and so beautiful. So, for me, it's very important to have an aesthetically beautiful place to work. And I've always maintained that, even if it's just one room, a small studio, as long as it has the right light and a good kind of karma to the space.
Yeah.
That's very, very important. So, I tell students, once again, when they're leaving school and they're anxious, all of them are anxious when they leave. And I always say, God, you got to have a space.
Yeah.
And don't let anybody take that space away from you. That's your space. You close the door. Nobody can get to you. And that's the biggest difference, I think, between getting work done and not getting work done.
Mm.
So, and I have friends who have beautiful studios in their homes. And some of them, it works great. And for some, it just doesn't work at all. Mine is across the street. So I walk out my door and I walk to the studio and then close the door. So it's good. I'm away from my house, but I'm close by.
Yeah, that's really nice. That's interesting. Yeah, I've been lately starting to think like I want a different space. Like I want to be able to
I should do it. Yeah, you
go
should do
across
it.
the street. Yeah. I think it would make a big difference. I can't describe what it is, but I feel like I need it to be external instead of, upstairs in the loft, which is where
Yeah,
I
I think
am.
the house, having a house, having responsibilities at home, it's just very difficult to distance yourself from that, and um, I just feel like I'm really very hard line about not letting anyone in unless I want them to be in there. And yeah, but just once again, it comes back to saying no,
Hmm.
like, no, sorry, I gotta work. And I think only really other artists are going to fully get that. I
Right.
think regular people they don't really fully get it, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
But you have to have a space where you feel like you can make something happen.
Yeah. Very cool. I've had you on the phone, I think, for like or on Skype for like 2 hours now.
Oh my God!
I just looked at the clock. My computer's already shut itself down.
Oh, no,
It's already
fun.
gone. All right, I'm tired. I'm going to
No,
sleep.
we have a good time. It's great to
But
talk to
I
you.
imagine you have things to do.
I probably do. That's
But
okay. This is fun.
yeah, it's been so much fun. I mean, that
Yeah,
was
but if
a really
you need to
fast one.
wrap it up soon, that's fun too.
Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah, I could ask you more questions, but yeah, I should probably wrap it up. I'm like, because I always think of it like the editing later on is what kind of kills me.
Oh, that's hard. Yeah, that's what I said at the outset. I'm really impressed with this endeavor of yours. I mean, it's so generous of you to take time out of your work and talk to other people who are doing work, and it's a real service to artists, really, to be able to hear this and know that they're not alone in their weirdness. It's really, really quite a thing, and I appreciate the fact that you've given the time.
Thank you. Well, I get a lot out of it too, I have to say.
Excellent. Good. I hope so. Good.
So, seriously, I had so much fun talking to you. I really enjoyed it. So I feel like I know you really well or something.
I think people who care about the same things it really is a family. It's a tribe, really, and we need our tribe
We do.
to stay sane, to know that we're on the right path. So yeah, great. And I had a great time.
Good.
Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Go to the show notes at savvypinner.com to see examples of Kathleen's gorgeous flower paintings and her other works, including a few paintings from Civita Castellana. And if you're curious, you'll also find links to everything else that we talked about. And while you're there, pick up your free copy of Essential Tips for Artists. After 100 episodes of the Savvy Painter podcast, I thought it would be useful to gather quotes from artists interviewed here on the podcast. Bit by bit, I'm going back through episodes and pulling words of wisdom, techniques, and inspiration into an ebook. So this is volume 1. Grab your free copy today. Just go to savvypainter.com/ebook. A special shout out goes to Amy Fitzgerald, Barry Koplowitz, Gail Height, Art of Joy, Abby McGray, Winslow Art Center, Carolyn Green, and Renee Bates. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate your contributions to the podcast. So until the next time, this is Antrees Wood with the Savvy Painter podcast. Thank you so much for listening.